In this video, I'm going to explain why artificial intelligence signals the end of the road for accounting in the traditional sense. I've had the unique opportunity to work with cutting-edge technologies, and for me, the path forward is very clear, and I'd like to share that with you today. So let's start by talking about the role of an accountant in an organization. Why do companies hire them? Well, for two reasons. The first is to generate true, fair, and compliant financial reporting. That's a legal obligation. And for that, the accountant uses knowledge of accounting principles to ensure that people outside the organisation gain a reliable picture of what's happening inside the organisation. And while that's really important for external stakeholders, the real value of the accountant comes from the timely and informed decisions that they help business leaders make as a result of their expertise. And that's the analytical part of the role. So broadly speaking, an accountant is a special type of analyst. They take raw data and analyse it and turn it into information. So let's start with the most basic type of descriptive analytics. That's pretty much just describing what's happening. For example, revenue increased year on year because of strong sales in the Asia Pacific region. Makes sense? Descriptive, high-level view of what's happening inside the business. Diagnostic analysis is next, to understand why something happened. For example, if the gross margin declined, we could diagnose the reason as being because there was an issue with product margin mix. We can then take that one step further and conduct predictive analysis to understand what we think will happen based on one or more factors that affect the business. Now let's talk about prescriptive analytics, which really builds on the predictive analytics to recommend what action should be taken going forward. If we were worried about declining profitability, an accountant might prescribe that the business should focus more on higher margin product lines. Notice now we talk more about the future and less about the past. Finally, let's now move to perceptive analytics, which is entirely future focused. Perceptive analytics is constantly scanning the business landscape for signals which might indicate a new trend. Perceptive analytics seeks to fix problems before they're even problems. By picking up signals early, we can spend the time to understand what they really mean. Analytics becomes significantly more valuable when it leads to a decision. Describing that the gross margin was down is interesting, but it's not immediately clear what we should do about that. On the other hand, perceiving that there's been a shift in product mix is incredibly valuable if you can identify the reasons early. You can address the mix issue today before it becomes a gross margin issue in 6 months' time. So let me be clear, AI is bad news for accountants, at least in the traditional sense. Artificial intelligence is now better, faster, and cheaper than human analysts. It's not to say that we don't need accountants, but the accountants will need to adopt to a world where they're not conducting the analysis. Businesses that don't leverage AI will be left behind because those that do will be able to make better decisions faster and cheaper. Let's take a simple transaction analysis for an e-commerce site. Let's assume we've extracted a list of transactions that relate to John, who has visited our e-commerce store a number of times. We can see that John comes to the site to buy his coffee pods, and he appears to be looking at a different machine. So when I run these transactions through a model such as GPT 4.1, this is the response I get, which we might say is descriptive analytics. It accurately describes the transactions, and it's a true and fair view of what happened. But now let's run the same facts through a reasoning model. Notice how we're not simply describing what happened, we're starting to imagine ways in which we might be able to influence John's behaviour. In this scenario, I might even suggest that John is starting to stockpile brand B coffee pods so he can make the switch as soon as the coffee machine goes on special. If we were smart about it, we might even be able to accelerate John's switch to machine B by constructing a promotion that he's likely to respond to. So if we return to the original proposition that the accountant serves two roles, it's clear that for the most part, algorithms can do an equally good job as humans describing or summarizing what happened. With the right set of instructions, AI can almost certainly deliver true, fair, and compliant reporting. But what's new and interesting is that algorithms can now take this one step further and provide perceptive analytics. and they perform perceptive analytics around the clock, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. These models don't take holidays or weekends because they're always running and scanning information for trends. In other words, with the right set of facts and a good reasoning model, it's very hard to see why a business would employ a human analyst. So where to from here? Well, there's no doubt that AI will have a significant effect on the number and the type of accountants that organisations will need in the future. But that's not to say that AI will replace accountants entirely. It will eliminate parts of the role that are rule-based and repetitive. Spreadsheets and reconciliations, for example, just won't be required. But what will be required is the need for human judgment, ethical oversight, and strategic insight. This is the value of human wisdom, which no algorithm today can replace. The opportunity for the accounting profession is to move from number crunchers to storytellers, and in doing so they become trusted advisors who use AI to construct compelling narratives to business leaders to help them make better decisions faster.